Okay. Season 2, episode 1.
Take one.
Take one.
We only do take ones.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Really?
We're one take wonders.
That's right.
Hi, Loren.
Hi, Kelsey.
How are you doing?
I am fantastic.
Can you believe we made it to season 2?
We did. Are we doing the intro now?
What do you mean? Are we doing the intro now?
I don't know.
We're just starting.
I'm punchy.
Spongy. So we are doing the intro. We're doing the episode. How do you feel about that?
I feel really good about it.
Okay.
If you feel good about it, I do too.
I feel great. So what I do think we want to spend some time talking about today and setting up season 2, episode 1, is, after the first season, we really wanted to focus on people's stories of leadership, how they got to where they were, their journeys, all that good stuff. And I think we fulfilled that mission well. And as we spent some time thinking about where did we want season 2 to head, we really wanted to think a little bit more about leadership as a whole. And the question that I think we kept pondering was, there's all this conversation around job employee satisfaction at work. And I think we were wondering, is satisfaction in employees in higher education its own thing? Or is employee satisfaction a cultural society thing, and then higher ed is a microcosm of that? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I season 1 was intentionally about the leadership journey, the personal stories that made for those journeys and the richness and the bumps and the successes that people have experienced. And to your point, I've been thinking a lot about the enterprise of higher education and what do leaders do as a consequence of the conditions that it faces, whatever those are. You've mentioned one of them, which is employee satisfaction and sort of the well-being of people that make up that enterprise. And so for season 2 to really focus more intently on what is the condition of higher education and what do leaders do about that condition? In this case, the condition being the question about employee satisfaction, retention, well-being, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think, at least for me in my career and in time spent in higher education, we spent a lot of time talking about student satisfaction, which is still incredibly important. They're clearly, I'm going to say the word, the client, the customer of higher education, but really how students are satisfied, how they are, they are the product of higher education. But I think we're at a moment in time that how are we thinking about the people that are serving those students and their well-being and their satisfaction? What I think is an interesting little piece is the rhetoric around higher education has been somewhat negative in the media for years, right? It costs too much, you don't get enough out of it, yada, yada, yada. But what's been really interesting in this last, I'll call it year, maybe a little longer, is that the people working in the industry have started to take on some of that negative rhetoric of what is the mission, vision, and value of higher education. And I work in this industry because I believe in the mission, and is the mission lacking right now?
Well, how could you not if you're attacked? And if leadership of the institution is tacking, meaning sort of veering left or right based on popular opinion, it gets confusing about what your mission is if leadership is not clear about that. And if the rhetoric, if the narrative, if the commentary is, glass half empty. So it'd be hard, I think, to not take some of that on. And I've thought a lot about lately this year, as we think about season 2 especially, what are those conditions which are challenging employee recruitment, retention, and satisfaction? And what does that reality, if we believe it to be true, and I think we have enough evidence that there's certainly some truth to that, then what does that reality suggest for the long-term health and the civic purpose of higher education? And then most importantly, and related to your earlier point about this podcast, what can leaders do about it? What is it that leaders need to be thinking about if those things are true and that long-term health and civic posture of higher education might be under attack?
Yeah, and I think it can feel overwhelming, right? Like that feels like a big thing to tackle. How do you handle all of that piece? So last year, Compass Group partnered with SCUP, NERSA, Akuhoai, Loren from Workshop Architect, a couple other folks from some universities, and really asked the question of how are people doing, feeling, what do they need to feel committed to their roles on college campuses. And I think what we heard back was a lot of what's happening in the national trends of employment, right? To your point, well-being, how am I valued, et cetera. But what I think was really interesting is intentional training and development came out as a solution, compensation, how to help with burnout, and the other piece is valuing staff. Mm-hmm. And what I think is interesting, and this may be me a little more student affairs-y side of things, but when we talk about valuing staff, it's not throw a pizza party every once in a while. It's actually understanding the needs of the staff and then helping them grow as individuals.
Mm-hmm. I mean, pizza's good.
Pizza's good. No one's saying no to pizza.
But it's not really valuing. It's just pizza.
That's right.
Yeah, I know we're going to get into that in season 2, and we're going to have guests that can help really dive deep. What do we mean by valuing? What do we mean? What is wrong with the compensation structure? Why is it so difficult to appropriately acknowledge skill and experience and then pay accordingly, especially relative to market, which is the choice that people have beyond higher education? What does it look like when people feel like they have agency and voice over their environment? And I think if we can get into that this season with some great guests, as we will, it's possible leaders have some additional tools. And I really appreciate Compass Group taking the leadership to do that survey and to partner with folks who are really supporting the staff in some of the areas of campus.
Yeah, I think the one thing when you talk through all of that, the one thing that comes up for me is like the whole thing of do more with less seems so archaic. And, we'll talk about it from a higher ed lens, but I'm hopeful that I think there's other resources, and everyone's going through this. I think every industry, there's people saying, well, we're just going to do more with less. It's like, that's not the path forward to keep employees happy, healthy, and committed to your organization.
Well, maybe it's do less with less. Greater clarity over the things that we're really good at and do those things exceptionally well. It's a little cliche-ish, but that may be worth getting into a little bit this season too, is how is it that leaders of institutions or leaders of parts of the institution can help create greater clarity over the mission and over the things that we can be exceptional at, especially in light of the economic situation or competitors or student needs. Doing those things really well versus lots of things only a little bit. And I would say the other thing about the survey you're mentioning, and I hope we get into this, is I wasn't necessarily surprised by the results in aggregate, what we learned. There were some specific things, though, we learned that surprised me. For example, that maybe dissatisfaction or questions about long-term careers in higher education isn't just with, say, entry-level staff or with certain facets of let's say, student affairs, but rather people in relatively senior roles had very similar kind of feelings. So that made me wonder, okay, the people that we would look to help solve some of these things are also, or maybe themselves, wondering about the same kinds of challenges other staff that are earlier in the careers, maybe have fewer tools and less political power.
That's right. So I think the stat is 3 in 4 felt supported by their direct manager, but only 40% felt supported by campus leadership. And so it was just an interesting dynamic that they were feeling supported by direct leadership, but then everyone was struggling with this campus leadership. And I just wonder, the role of university president chancellor right now is
tough.
Ooh.
Been tough a long time, but it's especially tough now. Yeah.
Right? And so it's how are we, how are the people that are showing up in those leadership roles able to set that bigger vision, mission, purpose, and be steadfast in it so that the others that are serving can feel supported and committed to the greater good.
Yeah, and we'll get into that this year. And, we've talked about different roles, and I've wondered, is it the same for faculty and staff? Is it true for only some kinds of staff? Is it true in procurement as much as it's true in, say, auxiliaries or student affairs? Is it true for presidents? Or do they have a totally different set of conditions they're dealing with than faculty? Is this a universal thing across the academy? Is it universal in society? Are corporations or higher ed adjacent businesses and business partners feeling some of the same pressures that higher ed are feeling? So I think if unpacking this, exploring this year, hopefully will help people figure out rather not just what's going on, but what to do about it. So Kelsey, you mentioned the survey and some of the partners that were involved studying essentially what's going on in higher education. I wonder if it'd be maybe helpful for everybody if you want to tell the story about how that came to be.
Sure. So back in November of 2022, brought together a group. When I started in my role at Compass Group, it was to think about higher ed as an industry. Where is it headed? What's happening in higher education? What does the future hold? Still my role today to think about those things. I'm not sure why I said the past. But anyways, so brought a group of campus leaders, association leaders, and business partner leaders together to just really have a conversation. And there wasn't a super formal agenda aside from we all have a vested interest in the future success of higher education. Where do we think the current status is, and what do we think the future holds? And through a lot of conversation, everything really kept coming back to the future of leaders in higher education. We have a huge amount of people retiring in the coming years. We've had people that have spent time in higher education for years upon years, and this future generation is moving into a space while the rhetoric around higher education continues to be somewhat negative. And so as a group, it was kind of like, well, what do we do about this information? We know, we think maybe it's happening. So from there, we enlisted E15, which is a research company that works with Compass Group, to really ask some questions about what's happening in leadership. How are people feeling? What's happening in their roles? Are they thinking about leaving higher ed? Are they thinking about staying? What makes them stay? What makes them excited? All of those pieces. And so together, Compass Group and 3 associations, ACUHOI, NERSA, and SCUP, really spent the better part of a year going through this research study, analyzing the data, and thinking about the impact that leadership would have in higher education. You were part of this process, Loren. What thoughts did you have along the way when we were talking about leadership in higher education?
Well, so the first thing I'll say is sometimes in leadership, all you have is a question. You have no answers. You just have a question. So what I appreciate about that story is all you really had when you pulled us together, and we came with really no agenda because you had a question and we had questions, right? So that's maybe the first thing to say that I really appreciate about that story is sometimes all you have is a question. The other thing I would say is, and it did start, and this is natural, with a lot of opinions and perspectives and things like that. But what it became was a question to be studied, which gets us to the survey that we'll take a look at this year in this podcast with people. And I appreciate that a great deal because we didn't simply live with our perspectives and opinions and experiences and histories and gripes and all those things, but rather we actually studied the question a little bit that everybody agreed we needed to take a look at. So there was a methodology to that. And so those two things I think are frankly great lessons for leadership as much as they are great information for the podcast.
Agreed. So really our focus was to create a survey to better understand the challenges and benefits of careers in higher education, assess employees' preparedness for various events or challenges. Those are happening all the time. Mm-hmm. And identify opportunities to improve training and development, right? So how do we set up the future for success in higher education?
Yeah, great. I think that's great. And I think having experts and people that have studied different components of the question we were asking and the survey probes, people who have really looked at aspects of that and can help pull those apart and turn it upside down and look at it from new angles and give people some ideas about what to do about them, I think will be really a lot of fun for hopefully the listeners, but definitely for you and me this year.
For sure, fun for us. So our intent would be in the first episode with a guest, let's say, since this is our first season 2 episode. But the first episode with a guest is to have someone on from E15 to actually walk us through the findings. And what we really want to do is I kind of have this feeling about data that's out there right now. There's all this research out there about what's happening with employees and employee movement, but no real action behind it. It's kind of like, here's the data, good luck to you. And so my hope, our hope, is to bring someone on from E15 to lay out our findings and actually kind of work through what to do with that information.
Right. So why don't you preview a little bit, Kelsey, how we want to go into this season and what it is you think we'll be addressing in season 2?
So we're looking at topics such as valuing staff, compensation, presidential perspective and transitions, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, training and development, well-being, onboarding. The one I really like is courageous leadership. We're not sure how direct that starts to look, but we really want to dig into some of these topics with experts that have worked in those spaces or in fields or have tools, resources, examples for people that are currently in leadership roles to put into practice.
Yeah, and though it's too early to share exactly whom, I know the names that you and I have talked about know a lot. They know a lot about these different elements of valuing and training and compensation and well-being and all the things that really are on the minds of people who work in higher ed and the leaders who are responsible for it. So I think the people that we've got in mind are going to take us a long ways towards better understanding and maybe doing something about those things.
Yeah. So if you're a data junkie and you want to dig in with us, join us on our next episode where we'll get into all the data. I promise we'll make it approachable and interesting. And if you really want to take those notes, have that notepad ready. But really excited to have the information and give some hope for the future of leadership in higher education.
Yeah, that's great. I'm excited about this because we'll be able to, I hope, give our listeners, in addition to the stories and the journeys that we did during season 1 and we'll certainly continue to have in season 2, some real practical things and at least some knowledge about how the place works based on where you are in the organization, which might help you as a leader, help our listeners as a leader, navigate it and make change to improve the conditions for themselves, right, and for people that are counting on them.
And maybe there'll be even a nugget or two from us,
maybe,
from our experiences along the way on what we've done well and where we can continue to improve.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited about season 2. I think the resources that we're going to bring to the table will be valuable for higher ed and hopefully beyond.
Well, I like excited. I was going to say I'm even surprised we have a season 2, but I'm excited and surprised there's a season 2.
Yeah. Well, here we go.
Stay tuned.
All right, Lauren, we're at the end of episode 1 of season 2. It's time for some extra credit.
I need all the extra credit I can get.
No, I always needed extra credit. But I think we want to spend a little time today talking about South by Southwest EDU.
Yes.
So, Austin, Texas. You know, when we put together the idea for the podcast, one of the questions I think you asked me in the beginning is, you asked me, other people have asked me, what's my vision? Where do I hope things go? Where do we want to be? And my first answer was, we want to be featured on the Today Show. So
yeah, I was going to say, I don't remember South by Southwest first. I remember the Today Show.
The Today Show. So still dream big. Maybe after season 2, they'll come looking for us, or we'll put ourselves out there. But the other piece, and one thing that's been on my mind for a number of years, is South by Southwest. And in particular, South by Southwest EDU, they started this component really focused on innovation in education. And I think they've spent a lot of time in the K-12 space and what does the future look like. And they're really trying to bring up and bring in higher education and what does that look like and what's innovation and what does the future hold. And so, I don't know, it's kind of like, why wouldn't we be part of that? Right?
Yeah. How did you come to learn of South by Southwest, and why was that either number 1 or number 2 relative to today's show, depending on the day we talk about it? Why was that so important to you?
So interestingly enough, there's a person at Texas A&M University that I've known for a number of years. Shane, why am I blanking on the last name? But anyways, they do a Texas A&M house at South by Southwest, right? So it's all about brand recognition. It's being part of thinking about being thought leaders. And so him and I would talk about it. And it's some other folks, as I started to bring it up, it's like, there's just really ideas. It's an idea generation. It's a futuristic thinking. So when we think about the podcast and the future of leadership, it's like, gosh, how are we not in this space having this conversation?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I don't know if we said it yet, or maybe you said it and it just went right by me, but our listeners need to know we're going to be there. We've been accepted. And
what? We have?
Yeah. How about that, huh? She acts with such surprise. I wish people could see this, and I know it's audio only. I loved the idea because it was a imageable kind of standard that you articulated. Not that the Today Show isn't. I love Savannah Guthrie and Hoda Kotb and all of those folks there, Craig and Al. See, I watch too. But it was imageable. And I have always had a bit of a fascination myself with South by Southwest, mostly because of the music scene that was a part of that festival. And I know today it's a film festival, a music festival, an education festival, and I think a technology festival is the 4th big kind of thing, and hundreds of thousands of people go. But I could kind of get a feel, I see now. This is where creativity and innovation, this podcast can be about embracing people that are leading in that kind of way. And so I'm really excited about it. I have had no experience with it. I've certainly, heard people speak, heard bands play, heard it referenced. There are podcasters that have podcasted from there, so I'm pretty excited about going. So, and March in Texas versus Michigan's a good move too.
Seems great. Hope the sun's out. So, full disclosure. So we had been talking about it, and like all things that happen in the summer, deadlines come up real fast. And so we were sitting on the deadline was midnight on some certain date in end of July. And we're texting back and forth, and you're like, well, I got this. And so how about you tell everybody what our vision is for our session and the time that we have there?
Yeah. Yes, it was. You were traveling. You were giving a keynote, I think, at a conference or a symposium somewhere.
True.
It was, I might even have been a weekend night. I don't know, but it was an evening. You had to go give this keynote. I said, okay, I'll try to write this thing while you're keynoting. It'll be ready when you get back to your hotel room. Then you could submit it before midnight. I mean, that's just for full disclosure. But what I thought about was, well, it's too late to sort of develop content for a session, but what we're good at is convening people and collaborating around ideas and creating opportunities for people to engage around place making in higher education and belonging in higher education. So what came from our phone call before you ran off to your speech was placemaking and belonging in higher education, a meetup, and they have meetups as one of their formats where it's not content delivery. You don't sit passively. You engage with other people around aspects of the particular topic that you're interested in. And in this case, how can we actually create stronger sense of place and stronger sense of belonging in higher education? And the invitation is to educators, but also policymakers, advocates, programmers, students, faculty, anybody who's interested in, not just involved in, placemaking and belonging in higher education. It seemed to be something that is completely aligned with what you do in your company and what your colleagues do in your company and what we do in mine. And so I think we both bring something to the conversation, actually are accustomed to convening people around this kind of topic, and can learn a lot at the same time while making a contribution to a really, I think, great conference.
Yeah, and beyond. So we're on for this meetup on March 6th in Austin, Texas, at the Hilton. It is coming up. Like all things, deadlines do come. But we wanted to share it as a part of this so that those of you who are maybe considering coming, have thought about it, are already signed up to go. We would love to have you be part of this meetup, because you all are the ones that are going to make it have the impact that we intend to. Loren and I could sit around and talk all the time, but really it's you all and what you bring to the conversation that helps guide the innovation in the future.
Right. And if you go to the South by Southwest EDU website, our session, our meetup, placemaking and belonging in higher education, is on the website. You can find the information. Our profiles are there. You can tweet it and share it with people. Even if you're not going, please share it with other people, because we want anybody to come and everybody to come who has something to say or something to hear or something to offer about placemaking and belonging in higher ed. So you can get that information on the website, and we want you and or your friends and acquaintances to come to this. Yeah,
and if you happen to know someone at the Today Show or Good Morning America, I mean, we're not...
That's right.
Right. Feel free to send them along. If you have
an artist, that the Chronicle of Higher Education is registered, as is customary. So maybe our angle into the Today Show is through the Chronicle. What do you think?
Well, that'll be interesting.
It's not going to happen, is it?
I don't know. We'll see. But again, South by Southwest EDU, March 6th. More information, it'll be out there on our site. So thank you all for your support, and we'll see you around.
See you there.
Campus Confidential is presented by Compass Group, produced by Corey Insko, with your hosts Kelsey Harmon-Finn and Loren Roman.